Hey, this is Stephen Amell, and you are listening to Tomorrow's Legends, the podcast. Don't fail your city.
You think you know the story. You've heard it 100 times. But this is not the tale that you know, for this part of the story has yet to be written. Join Flash, Harley, and X-Force 11 as they take the Wave Rider into the near future and check in on some old friends. This is the new adventures of Superman and Lois, as chronicled by Tomorrow's Legends.
Hello, super fan of steel. Superman is back, and so are we. We are discussing season 4, and this episode, A Perfectly Good Wedding. I'm a little cold from training in the Arctic with Clark and John, but happy to be here. I'm X-Force 11.
And I'm Harley Quinn.
And we are Flashless tonight because he has turned into his alter ego, Cyber Ren. He's out visiting D. Vizsla, and so hopefully you should be getting some Mandalore content out of that, but they're going to enjoy some fun time connecting and actually meeting in person and hanging out and seeing a football game. So we're happy that they're getting to connect, so that's going to be fun.
That's right. Sounds fun for them.
Yeah. But you know who we have here?
Hello, legends.
Hey, Gideon. Good to have you here.
Hey.
So, talking about the other shows on our network, in addition to The Mandalore, you've got Dive into DC, and this coming week, they will be covering the first 2 episodes of the Penguin series, which is excellent. So they're going to cover episodes 1 and 2 this week, and then they'll be doing 2 episodes throughout the entire season. So get your feedback in for that because it's an excellent series. And then, yes, we're here covering Superman and Lois here on Legends, and you've heard us do Legends of Tomorrow, Stargirl, X-Men 97, Tomorrow People, and more.
And more is right.
Yeah. And hopefully doing the Lanterns sometime soon now that they've got casting going. So hopefully we'll get a timeline of when they're going to start filming. I think the Supergirl movie is starting to film first of the year. So hopefully Lanterns can get in there too, start filming first of next year. Maybe towards the fall we'll get Lanterns, but we'll see. We'll see.
Gotcha.
Do have a little bit of news, so
We interrupt this podcast for a special report.
So, unfortunately, the showrunner has confirmed that Adam Rayner will not be returning as Tal-Rho in season 4 of Superman and Lois. So, no rescue from Clark's brother.
Boo.
Yeah.
I was really hoping to get at least just like an appearance, like a cameo. Like I didn't need a whole storyline. I just needed like a little scene.
Yeah, that would have been fun. I guess, the cost and then maybe his availability too could have led to that. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to impact the storyline whatsoever. It just would have been a little bit of a nice thing, but
yeah,
I get it.
Meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice.
All right, getting into our ratings. I gave this one 9.5. Superman Returns. Wow, I was pleasantly surprised with an episode largely centered around Kyle and Chrissy from the title. I was concerned about a big drop after our first couple episodes. But I really enjoyed this episode. It had action, it had some cool sequences in there, but the real movement in the episode was from the relationships. We see Clark and Lois adjusting to this new reality with him. We see Lois working with both the boys. We see great friendships with Kyle and Chrissy and Lois, Kyle and Clark and Lois and Chrissy. Plus, I enjoyed getting to see Clark's new super suit for the first time. And we got, in our Facebook group, we've got some detail from Bitsy's Instagram that shows the little Superman logo that's in his suit. So we'll hopefully get to see more of that later. But just overall, it was a fun episode and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I gave this one a 9.5 reasons to call off the wedding. I mean, I totally agree with you. I was expecting a lot more of the wedding storyline, and I was very happy to focus on Clark's journey with the wedding as the B plot, basically. Overall, I thought it was really well done. I like that they addressed him having Sam's heart and how that would impact him physiologically. It's a little crazy to see how quickly that like John is becoming super also.
Mhm.
So on the one hand, you kind of have Clark over here struggling and like not quite himself. And all of a sudden Jordan went from like 0 to 12 in like a day, it feels like. I mean, really, it's been what, like probably 3 or 4 weeks, but still, it's just crazy. So I'm happy that at least like right now, John and Jordan, though, like aren't fighting about things. I know that has been a theory in the past. So we'll just have to see where they end it. And I like that Jordan wants to take some time. And now that kind of like his dad is back and John has powers, he actually has the space to do that. And I think that's important for him because I think right now he's really struggling with identity. Like, who am I? Which is also very typical teenager.
Yeah. So, well, you know what? Flash is not here, but he got us a message. So let's hear his thoughts about the episode.
Hey guys, this is the Flash here, sending in my rating and thoughts before you guys get going on the show here. I'm not going to be part of it this weekend. I am flying to Kentucky to drive into Cincinnati to meet up with Vizsla from the Mandalore podcast because we're going to watch the Eagles versus the Bengals game together. So yeah, fly, Eagles, fly. So here's my thoughts on the episode, season 4, episode 4 of Superman Lois. So I'm going to split my rating up here. I'm going to give all of the great stuff with Clark and Jonathan training, all of the great stuff with Lois and Jordan, and all the family stuff in between. I'm giving that a 9 because I really, really appreciate the show for how it dives into its family matters and the just watching how the Kents deal with everything. It's such a beautiful, beautiful story with them. I'll come back to that stuff in a moment. The other half of the episode, which was all focused on Kyle and Chrissy, I'm only giving that a 5. A 5, needless. Why do we have to watch this? Moments. Whatever you want to call it. I just don't care. I am so upset with the show. Now that I'm looking back on it, where the writers did the show wrong was divorcing Kyle and Lana. That's where their storyline completely got derailed. Lana has pretty much become non-important to the show. Yeah, she's the mayor, but anything with the mayor stories have honestly been kind of boring. What really happened, though, is they neutralized Kyle. Taking him away from that family made him completely irrelevant. And it's hard. I hate to say that, but I really just don't care about that character anymore. When he was with his family, he had purpose. He was the father. He was, and they had their family stuff to go through with them and the kids or whatever. And it gave us that idea, that feeling. I remember we used to talk on older episodes. It's so nice to have, there's another family in Smallville. It's not just the Kents. There's another family that we can watch go through their daily trials and tribulations and see how they work things out, a non-super family. And we enjoyed it. But since the divorce, there just hasn't been that. And Kyle used to be a dad. He used to be a firefighter. He even got powers for an episode, and that was really cool. He had relevance to the show. Now he's got none. Like absolutely zero. And nobody cares. And then you bring in Chrissy. And same thing. Chrissy came into the show as the news reporter of the Smallville Gazette, and you could have done stuff with her. You could have made her running around town trying to get stories. We got a little bit of that, but not enough. You could have just made her the new Lois Lane for Smallville and have her chasing stories down and doing stuff and just giving us that little side character, support character on the show. But as soon as you got her invested with Kyle, she also became completely irrelevant. We haven't seen her do anything about the newspaper. It's about her and her relationship. And now she's pregnant. And now she's getting married. And you know what? I'm sorry, Perry White, our good friend. I just don't care. I do not like that character. This episode especially annoyed the crap out of me. I don't like people in my real life that are spastic and sporadic and, fritzing out like that. I can't be around that type of energy. It drives me crazy. And I don't want to watch it in characters on my TV. It's not entertaining. It's not enjoyable. It's not funny. I don't find her funny at all. I just don't like that character. They've lost her on me. She was great early on, not anymore. So I'm only giving that stuff a 5. And I'm really disappointed because we only have 10 episodes in this final season and they wasted half an episode on these two characters. I know they have to do it. I understand we're giving everybody their fair shot at writing their characters off in the sunset, but I'm sorry to say those two, they're riding down a dark tunnel with no light at the end. There's just nothing there. Now back to the good stuff. I loved Clark and Jonathan and their training sequences. It was so cool to see because Jonathan's been missing out on the father-son bonding, the father-son training and building their relationship and having a good time together because they're both the athletes and they're both, just all that good stuff. And it was so great to see Jonathan finally getting that father-son time that he was so envious of. And now he gets to enjoy it with his Superman dad. And it was fun. And the effects, everything, it looked great. Watching them fly through the canyon, the Kessel Run and smashing through the iceberg and all that kind of it was just good stuff. Such good stuff. And then later in the episode, having Lois and Jordan work things out was so needed. I did not want to spend these next 10 episodes watching Jordan, woe is me, all that kind of stuff. I'm glad he has matured a little bit. He just needed a bit of time to work through some stuff, and him and Lois got to have a good talk and resettle themselves, back on the same page. And it was great. And I know I've been knocking on Jordan, since the beginning of this show. This episode finally showed me him mature as an actor. He finally just stopped being so stiff and so rigid and so amateur in his performance compared to everybody else. He just looked like a natural, normal teenager this episode. He was expressive. He looked like he let go. He softened up, let his body relax. He was able to express and have expression in his facial features. Finally, it came out of him, and I was glad to see it. So, way to go. And now we'll see where this goes forward. I love that he handed off his suit to his brother, and I love that he's like, I'm going to take some time and I'm going to use my powers. Here, John, you need it. Protect your identity. Get out there and do what you do. You've always been the superhero, the golden boy, so go do it. I love that for them too. The brothers made up and rekindled, and he's got support. Great stuff. So, I am going to knock this episode a little bit, so I'm only giving it a 9. There's a couple things that bug me. Number one is, even though the opening sequence was beautiful and no word said, like you guys had said, it was just a musical montage watching Clark return and everybody reunite. Yes, it was all beautiful. I loved it too. But I felt a little bit let down because the last thing we saw was him waking up. I fully expected to spend at least a few minutes in the fortress with Clark sitting up and going, whoa, Mom, what's going on? And have Laura explain things not only to him, but to us. What happened, how the science is going to work, how the heart is going to work, what you have to be wary of, what you have to watch out for. Like, give us some precautions, but most of all, just explain the science. How does this transplant work? That's all I wanted. But no, we just got Clark flying back home, happy reunion, and then later we saw him start having some complications. But we don't have any explanation, and this is where I'm a little bit bothered. Is I know it's a comic book show, a superhero show, and they've been really, really good at making it feel grounded and explaining the science and explaining everything behind it, and they dropped the ball here. They did not tell us how the hell a human heart can work in a Kryptonian body, because it shouldn't work. Two completely species from two different planets, from two different solar systems, Kryptonian hearts, we have no idea how many arteries they have, how many valves and different things they have. We know that Clark's heart has to pump 3 times. Human hearts only pump twice. So how the hell does a human heart going to work? It shouldn't work. It should not work as a direct one-to-one transplant. And that's what bugs me, is they didn't explain it. I'm glad that they showed him having trouble, because if you think about it, Sam's heart, how old is Sam? 65 years old? His heart is already old. There's no, the amount of stresses and pressures and everything that that heart is going to be under to operate in Superman's body, because he has superpowers. A human heart has never, ever been designed for that, been built for that, genetically prepared for that. It shouldn't work. I'm glad at least they're showing that he has problems. But what I want to see is him fly back to the fortress now and go, Mama Lara, what's going on? And then we get some explanation. We need that. I don't want to just throw this away. It just bugs me that they just plopped in a human heart into a superhuman Kryptonian. It shouldn't work. So I am a little bit miffed about that. But I only knocked it down 1. So it's not too bad. Anyway, guys, have a great show. I know you guys will do well. I can't wait to hear how you guys talk about everything, hear the feedback, and hear all the favorite scenes and stuff. So, yeah, have a good show. Flash will be back next week. Signing off.
So, yeah. So interesting thoughts there. I'm sure we'll get to some of those, some of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he did talk some about it, but yeah, it's better to show than tell sometimes. So I can see those kind of
Sometimes.
points. Yeah. So, it's one of those things. I would like to see more Fortress, but that's just me.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, maybe they're saving it for a later episode. I mean, obviously not too much later, but I don't know. You never know. We could get more. Maybe they were trying to set up the issues first before they explain it. I'm not sure. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's get into it.
All right. We're going to start at the beginning, sort of, with the return of Superman. So I absolutely love this opening scene with no dialogue whatsoever. Like at first, I actually kind of thought it might be a dream, but then the boys actually come running outside. So I thought this was just an amazing moment, and I love that they were able to pull it off all with just the music over the actors. I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, watching it the second time this evening, I think they did some stylistic choices in the filming. Like, I don't know if it was like how it was filmed, maybe with the camera lenses. It almost felt like a live action painting in some aspects of it, because it was just like her and the background and everything else. It just felt, that maybe epic. I don't know. But anyway, but yeah, they have dealt with so much in the past few days. It was nice to just see them happy. And you're going to hear this over and over with my thoughts because we know these characters so well. And the acting was so good, no words were needed. The
Right.
joy was just evident. And that was my theme for this episode, is there was a lot of joy in this episode. And it's exactly what we needed after the first 3. So
I totally agree with that. And what a switch to actually get the opening monologue with Tyler. I don't think we've had a lot of them. I'm fairly certain we've at least had one. At least I'm pretty sure the pilot. He does the pilot.
yeah.
But I thought it was just a really nice touch to hear his perspective on his own life altering journey. So we get to hear it in his words, and then we get to see the scar on his chest that isn't healing. So that's our first little clue that he's not back to his original self.
Yeah, for a show about Clark and Lois, we've not gotten this perspective as much, like you said. And I think it's a nice change, especially maybe from some other Superman property shows and things like that. But it sets up his journey through this episode and for the rest of the season. And we also kind of find out here there's a 3-week jump in time.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives him time to settle back in and kind of lay low. But the idea of his mortality is powerful. He died, he's come back, but he's not the same. And we get to explore that through this episode. And I think having him start off with this monologue helps us put him, ourselves in his shoes and look at things from his perspective and, ask those questions. And so I think it sets the tone well for this episode.
Yeah, I agree. I think it sets the tone that we're going to see it more through his eyes, whereas in the past, I feel like a lot of the time, especially last season, we're seeing it through Lois's eyes. So I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a nice touch and important to sort of set that at the beginning.
Yeah.
But talking about something that was super fun and just some scenes that were pretty great was just everything about John's super journey. And I think the thing that's sticking out the most to me is just that it's completely opposite of Jordan's, like in every aspect. And we're going to get into this a little bit more in like our next section, but it's just like all of his powers came at once. He's a complete natural, which Jordan is. I mean, I like the character of Jordan, but he's not a naturally gifted athlete. And of course, he gets all of Clark's nerdy like sci-fi references, and he knows like what to say back. And I love that for them, but it was just such a stark difference between John and Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it's intentional, but because of some things we're going to talk about later, I'm struggling with that part a little bit, actually.
Yeah. I love the two of them geeking out together. And
yes,
John has always been the one who is closer in temperament to Clark.
good point.
And so, again, we see the joy of the two of them training, and that was a blast. And it was also great to see John's speed and power, like flying straight through the iceberg, was super cool.
So wild.
But, taking it back to like season 1, we were talking about, okay, John's more like Clark and Jordan's more like Lois. And, and we talked about those early scenes where, she finds it easier to get through to Jordan and he finds it. So it's pairing them back up like we saw them at the beginning of the series. And here they have this new thing to bond over. So it was just a lot of fun to watch them, out there training and having a blast.
Yeah, it was fun. And I mean, even like, Clark kind of gets ahead of himself a little bit. He's like, okay, like I'm gonna show this kid, not really taking into considerations his new limitations, shall we say. So this is where if we hadn't picked up on it at the very beginning with the scar, now we really, really see that not all is quite well with Clark.
Mm-hmm.
He tries to go full out and he immediately has issues with his new heart. So he takes a nosedive into the glacier, which I think this is the funniest part. I'm sort of blending a couple of scenes together, but they immediately try to hide this from Lois in like the subsequent scene and like 100% fail at doing so. It was hilarious.
Yeah. It's forcing him to slow down. And I think it will help him in sharing the supering with the boys and also with the irons as the season goes along. So it's kind of getting him ready for that, because we have to remember in this world, he has been the only superpowered being.
Right.
It's not been revealed to us if there are other non-powered heroes like, a Batman or a Green Arrow, those type of people.
Mm-hmm.
But we know he is the only powered hero that has been out there and working. And so he's had to bear the weight of that for all these years. And so hopefully this can show him that he needs a team out there to help him. And so that's going to just make it easier for him to share things. even if by the end of the season we see him fully powered back up, he's kind of learned, okay, I need a team. I've got to share this, and passing on that legacy. So I kind of like the idea of that setting it up.
That's actually almost a slightly different take and twist on the reign of Superman. So you notice how we went out of order. Superman died, Superman returns. That, what you just said, could be the reign of Superman, including
True.
Superman himself. Like, that would be kind of cool. I would like that take on it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just such a novel thing. I mean, them breaking this from the Arrowverse was a big step.
Yeah.
And I think the writers and the producers have made the best of it. But I like how they're now bringing in the team and making it feel organic. And switching things up, storylines up, like they've done the entire run, where they take a character that is kind of known and then they switch it all up. We've seen with Bizarro and Doomsday and, all these different things. So, it's interesting.
Yeah. If only Brainiac will materialize, then we can all be happy.
I think that's in the cards. We've already gotten the mention of the name and things like that. So I think that's in the cards now, man. But that's just going to make me want another season. But anyway,
I know.
Among other things. It just kills me. It's so fun. I'm seeing now more on threads, people talking about Superman and Lois, which is great.
Yeah.
And I love it. I don't know if she's listening, but Bitsy's liking some of our tweets, which is awesome. But
if you're listening, we love you.
Yes, we do. We do. But it's just so cool hearing everybody talk about this season. And I'm just like, anyway. But talking about Bitsy's character, yes, hiding a secret from an award-winning journalist who happens to be your wife is not going to work. It's not going to work. But we also have to remember he is trying to maybe help her mentally and emotionally because she's still fighting and dealing with the effects of cancer.
Yeah.
She's living with the stress of seeing her husband killed, Lex coming after her, losing her dad. I mean, it's a noble intention, but she's strong, and I think he learned the lesson really quickly that, I can't hide this, so...
No, he's a terrible liar, and she's an investigative journalist, like an award-winning one. So it's like, you're not hiding anything from Lois Lane. Even if she wasn't his wife, which she is, and she knows all his tells anyway. Like, it didn't matter. Like, you didn't need super hearing. They were talking quite loudly when she walked straight through the door. They have super hearing and were so focused on their own conversation that they didn't hear her come in. I think that's telling.
Yeah. Oh, fun.
Love it. All right, so we're going to dive a bit more into the boys, and we have called this the Jordan issue. So Jordan is still spiraling after this whole phone call thing. He's just listening to the message over and over and obsessing over it, and he just can't move on, really.
Yeah, I'm really glad that John gives him some tough love here. And that part of that is what helps snap him out of it. Because I think we've seen growth from him, and looking at how he handled the breakup with Sarah. I mean, he is growing. He's a teenager. He's learning to work with stuff, and you combine all this with supering. But I'm glad his brother is able to, like, stop listening to the phone call to, give him some of that tough love that he needs.
I totally agree. I was definitely happy that John was trying to help him, like, in his own way. Like, I mean, they're brothers, they're twins. Like, he's not going to be, like, super uber, like, compassionate. But at the same time, I think he's helping in his own way for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, Jordan's, like, really struggling, obviously, with everything that happened specifically like with Lois. I mean, he's ruminating on this message over and over again that she's picked John. And but he's also at the same time sending John into situations that he shouldn't be sending him into because he's completely untrained. So it just kind of seemed a little irresponsible to me that he's just like, oh, yeah, you can do this. Like, you got this, man. Like, he's trying to empower him, which on the one hand, I appreciate, but it's because he doesn't want to deal with his mom. Like, like he doesn't want to fly her to Metropolis because he doesn't want to be around her. And so he's sending his brother, who has no idea how to do anything, into all of these like dangerous situations.
Yeah, yes and no. I can see the points here because John is technically untrained in the powers, but we have seen that he is very natural with them in his progression. Yeah. Plus, he's had the athletic training his whole life, and he was training to be a firefighter. So he's got there. So I can see how Jordan would think John is ready, and I can leave it with him. But I also think Jordan is resigned at this point of like, I'm done. You take it all. And
agreed.
So he's in that black cloud. He's like, listen, you've got all the powers. You're better than I am. I'm out. So it's a little bit of both. So yeah, it's not a good answer either way, but yeah, so.
No, I mean, that's exactly how it felt. But I guess, I don't know. He's not experienced in the superheroing. And we will get back into this in a few points, but it's like the way that Jordan was treated at the very beginning versus the way that they're treating John is very, very different. Mm-hmm. So we're gonna come back to that. I really love this episode, but this is probably the bits that knocked it down a little bit for me. Mm-hmm. Anyways, so we're gonna talk a little bit about Jordan and Sarah because I was just ecstatic to see they've gotten to a good point in their friendship, to be perfectly honest. It's not awkward between the two of them. There's no more like, will they, won't they? They can just talk to each other again. They can have a good friendship. And she has some really great advice. So I was very happy to see that. I love these scenes.
Yeah. Sarah is so good in this episode.
Yes.
She may be a teen, but she's mature, and it's so nice that they can talk and they can have this friendship. We get to see Jordan is growing slowly, but he's growing. And so I really appreciate that he is willing to listen to her advice. And that just backs up kind of what John was saying. So it just adds in that he is progressing. But yeah, I like the dynamic that we're back on the friendship level at this point. So,
yes, I was very happy to see that for sure. So I'm kind of jumping over to the scene where I said he sends Jordan to Metropolis. Jordan sends John to Metropolis, I think is what I was trying to say. Yeah. I mean, this is the second time. So the first scene is when he takes Lois to kind of confront Gretchen / oh my gosh, I totally just forgot her real name. But they did find out her real name.
I don't know, because it still says Gretchen Kelly in the IMDb for this ep, but anyway.
Anyways, Cheryl something. Anyway, they figured out her real name. And so they confront her on the rooftop. That was the first instance. That wasn't overly dangerous, but you definitely got the sense that Jordan didn't want to be around Lois, right? Now, in the second instance, it's very much a like dangerous situation. Now, to your point, he's been training as a firefighter. So in theory, because I'm certain Kyle never sent a teen into an actual fire, but in theory, he understands how to like kind of handle these situations. But it's just, did he really not stop to think that this was clearly a setup? Like it just seemed like too suspicious for that to be happening. Did he know? I guess he didn't know it was like Cheryl Gretchen that was the one in trouble, but I don't know. I thought this was a bad call on Jordan's part to send John into a literal firefight. And then he doesn't even go to save him. He heard it first. Like Clark clearly didn't hear anything. And so that really frustrated me because his whole excuse about not going and sending John, or not about not going, but about sending John, was that Clark needs to lay low. He needs to be out of the limelight, right? And then he has to end up going anyway because he has to save John. Like, Jordan, just go save John yourself.
Mhm.
You have the super suit. Just show up and save him. I don't know. That bothered me.
Yeah, I want these two to be super bros and, be in it together. But even with a 3-week jump, they're not at that point yet. And honestly, I don't know that would feel organic. But
True.
not coming to save your brother? I mean, Jordan has gone from reckless, I'm going to do it regardless, to non-responsive.
Yeah. He's like
just,
totally flipped.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, Clark's hand is forced. He's being outed. But it was good to see him in action in the new suit. But yeah, he's going to be noticed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's no way you can kind of get over that, get over that, get around that. I mean, they're gonna see it.
Yeah.
As we clearly see at the very end. Anyways, my question, which I know you have an answer to, was who was this fire villain? I did not recognize him, so I did not remember seeing him before, but it seems that we have.
Yeah, his name is Hacksaw Chronic.
That's a name.
Yeah, and so he was in season 3, episode 13, and he was one of Lexa's goons. I mean, he was using the flamethrower arm things there as well, so that's not the first time we've seen those.
I think I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, so the actor Petar Gatsby, it's Petar. He plays a henchman / bad guy in a lot of things, including an episode of Arrow way back in the day.
Of course.
But yeah, he's just got that look. But yeah, so he was in that one episode. So he's one of Lex's trained guys. So
okay. So I mean, kind of okay that I sort of completely forgot about him in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah. But okay, so we've seen him before. All right.
Yeah.
I mean, he was kind of wicked, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
So whew, maybe we'll see him again.
Yeah.
All right. This whole scene though, like when Clark shows up, he's walking towards the dude who's just like throwing the fire into his chest. I was very much expecting something to go wrong. But he ends up making it through unscathed. So I was very surprised by that.
Yeah. So watching this the second time, I was live commenting the first time, not taking notes.
Yeah.
And so I missed stuff. So like I really caught where, Superman first comes in and he literally swallows up the fire. That was just such a cool effect. And all I'm thinking, like you, is something's going to happen. Would we see Clark coughing up fire and ash later on? I still wonder if we're going to see effects from this later on. But then, frankly, just him walking up on the fire and just walking into the fire cannons until they blow up was just so amazing. But yeah, again, I was like, what's going to happen? Something's going to happen. Like he's going to get burned. He's going to get singed. He's going to be coughing up, whatever is going to, and we may see it he's got a next episode. He's got a nagging cough from the, whatever, the smoke inhalation. I don't know. But yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing.
All right. I'm glad it wasn't just me. So that was a good scene, but I love the ending and how it came out with it exploding.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, oh, that's so cool. But still, anyway. All right. So wrapping up the stuff with the brothers. All right. Don't get me wrong. I love that Jordan comes around. He hands over the Superboy suit. It was very sweet and touching. But this is where I wanted to bring up how differently they're treating John than they treated Jordan. Because it's exactly how they handled this entire situation. John's like, I'm sorry I went to Metropolis. And they're like, oh, it's fine. No, actually, you did a really great job. literally we had the exact same scenario with Jordan, and he was essentially grounded for life. Like they were really hard on him about it. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like on the one hand, I want to give Lois and Clark the benefit of the doubt, say they maybe learned their parenting lesson, but also it just seems like they're treating John just 100% completely different than Jordan in this receiving superpowers scenario. I don't know. What do you think?
So I'm not a parent. I work around a lot of kids in a school,
Yeah, you do.
and I see parenting a lot in my church over the years.
Yeah.
Kids are different,
Hmm.
and parenting style for one kid might work, and then that same style is not going to work on the other kid.
Mm-mm.
So
I feel that.
also, you like you said, Clark and Lois may have learned from their parenting of Jordan there. They all, they could be parenting John differently. But I agree with you. It does seem unfair that they're not being like punished equally.
I know
But
it just seemed weird. I don't
yeah,
know.
I'm like wondering, does having a weak Clark change things? I mean, it
Possibly.
shouldn't, because when Clark was dead, Lois was not sending Jordan out in the field.
No.
So
She was
like,
against it, in fact.
yeah,
So
so I just I don't know. Like I agree that is troubling that like, unless they said like, we're doing this differently. Like the interesting thing is it's not coming from Jordan saying like you're treating him totally different, and
no.
that kind of leading into like that doubt that Lex threw in there, like, you love him more. Like
Yes.
I could definitely see that happening, but they're not leading into that. So it's kind of interesting, but I would like to hear some like, listen, we learned and we're sorry, we were too harsh here, but I don't know. Like it when it's more difficult because they're twins. Like it'd be
Yes.
different if they were different ages and time had
Yes.
passed. Like you're parenting one kid with superheroes and then you're parenting this next kid coming along. You're going to do things differently, regardless of their personalities. But
Hmm.
these two are twins. And so, like, yes, there's things that have happened, but like, let's hear some explanation of, like, okay, But yeah, I don't know that we'll get that of like, we've
No.
learned these things. It's different. We're sorry. We were too harsh, or I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but I did not think about this until you brought it up. But so I think that's your parenting instinct
Hmm.
coming forward and
A little
like
bit.
being that advocate for the other kids. So like I appreciate that because I wouldn't have thought about that. So that's the fun part of the podcast.
I know. Yeah. And I'm sure maybe a lot of people haven't thought of it that way. I don't know. It just like really stood out to me. I
Hmm.
don't know why. I just was like, this is not how they handled Jordan's situation at all. In fact, it's like 100% completely the opposite. Like, they're like, oh, you went out and did that? Great. It's almost like, thanks for taking the initiative, buddy. But like when
Hmm.
Jordan went out and did it, they're like, where have you been? Why would you do that? That's so dangerous. And so I don't know. It is completely different circumstances. Clark was 100% healthy and at the, pinnacle of being Superman, and now he's like newly risen from the dead with a 60-year-old human heart in him. So
Hmm.
slightly different, but at the same time, John has zero experience being a superhero.
Hmm.
And Jordan's just like, oh yeah, go do this, go do this. And they're just like, yeah, it's great. Good job. I'm like, what? Makes no sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, okay, let's move on to the wedding, shall we? All right. So, wedding bliss, I'm Ron
Yeah.
Burgundy. I liked seeing Chrissy back at the Gazette. it felt weird the last couple of episodes without having her around because Lois was definitely there, but it was just her. So I liked seeing her there. It felt more like old times, like the two of them kind of going back and forth. And she's very clearly struggling with all of her wedding details. The courthouse is flooded. There's nothing they can do about that. And then Lois offers to host the wedding at the farm. So I thought that was very sweet on Lois's part. But of course, Chrissy seems very hesitant, which starts to set up a little bit of a theme that some people may have liked more than others.
Yeah. I knew they were going to be here for Chrissy and Kyle, but they went out fully. It was like no holds bar. We're going to like decorate. We're going to do as much as we can with as short a notice. They just went all out, and it was just so fun.
I thought it was a lot of fun, and it was sweet. I think it was very nice of them to do that. Just like a shout out to this scene because it absolutely cracked me up. Like this is just after Lois comes in, John and Clark are arguing about if they're going to tell Laura what's going on with Clark. And then at the very end of that, she's like, well, I have good news. We're throwing a wedding. And they just look at her with like the blankest stares ever. And it just really cracked me up. I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah. They're like, okay.
Why is this great news? You mean we're hosting a wedding? It was like they just stared at her like, yeah. I'm sorry, what? It was great.
So Chrissy's mom, I'm hopefully going to pronounce this correctly, Laura Sadiq. She played councilwoman / mayor Emily Pollard in Arrow seasons 5 through 7. And so I was like, she kind of looks familiar. And that's where I knew her from. And, she's done some other stuff. She's done a ton of like voice acting work. Like I was looking at a bunch of cartoons and different stuff like that. But this was the main spot that I knew her from. So, but yeah, so.
Interesting.
Want to bring that in there. So
yeah, no, well, because I was with you, I'm sitting there going like, where do I know her from? Like she looks so familiar. And I'm sure that has to be it. Although I do kind of want to look up her IMDb to see maybe some of the characters she's voiced. So I may have to do that in a little bit, just, for funsies. But what I wanted to talk about specifically with Chrissy's mom. So this lunch with her and Kyle and Chrissy. Oh my goodness. I see why Chrissy describes her mom as intense because she's very intense and she very much does not approve of any aspect of their relationship. She's like, oh, you're living together? She's like, oh, I'm sure she's close with your daughter because they're not that far off in age. I was like, oh my God. Oh my God.
Yeah, this was hard to watch.
Yes.
And like
uncomfortable.
I so empathize with Kyle in this situation, like trying to be the best here. But like, since we've never met her before, we have no clue why she disapproves. Thankfully, we get some of that information later, but this was just, it was like, oh, golly.
I'm right there with you. I was like, oh, wow. Like that poor Kyle. I mean, like he was trying so hard. And then at the end, Chrissy's just like, no, just stop talking.
Yeah. It's like, how long's it been since you got divorced? It's like, okay, all right.
Oh. God, poor man. I did feel bad for him. We do get that. We do get that perspective later on, but we could talk about that a little bit later. Another thing. So I guess what I really appreciated about this storyline is just like, I found it just light and funny. It's just like the little things they did with this, like Kyle's horror at the prospect of grills that have to be plugged in. I thought that was absolutely hysterical. Because my husband would legit have the same reaction. Yeah. He's like, I'm sorry, did you say plug in grills?
Yeah.
Take me there now. Like, I
Yeah.
need to assess this terrible situation that you have just brought to my attention. He's so concerned over poor Clark's barbecue skills or Clark's poor barbecue skills, however you want to word that. And I loved the callback to, I think, a very early season 1 where they're at the Cushing's barbecue. Or is it the Cushings are at their house? I don't know. There was a whole bit with him and Kyle about the barbecue.
You're right. Yeah, this is a win for the writers and the continuity folks because calling back to that probably season 1 episode, and Clark is super at a lot of things, but grilling not so much. But those ribs look good, and he said he followed Kyle's recipe. But yeah, as you know, like I'm not much of a cook, but like you don't grill, on electric, like unless like
I mean, is it considered a grill if it's plugged in? I mean, like for real?
Yeah, it's electric griddle as opposed to a charcoal or gas, but like
Okay.
So but like yeah, it's like unless you're like in New York City where you like have no way of having anything like. But yes, so you're out in the country. You're like, come on.
You have acres of land. I'm sitting in it.
Oh, but yeah, I love that. Again, consistent writing, consistent characters across the season. I love those little touches.
I did too. I thought it was great. Another thing I thought was great that apparently our dear co-host, hated. I thought Chrissy's manic rant was absolutely hysterical. It just made me laugh because it really puts us in her headspace. In case we like have not figured it out, she is 100% freaking out. She is not ready to get married and do this whole thing just yet, and she's just like, everything is out of control and she can't handle it. And I just thought it was very well done. It made me laugh.
Yeah, I absolutely loved her and Sarah in this scene. Sarah being there for Chrissy was great. Yeah, they're close in age, but I think Sarah genuinely cares for Chrissy, and she knows Kyle and Chrissy are good for each other. So it was fun to see them have, again, those callbacks to the gummies and other things that they've talked about, and they have similar taste in music. And so they've made these connections. And so, again, it's calling it back. And like we talked about with Sam previously, when they brought these actors back, they knew it was going to be limited.
Yep.
And they wanted to make the best of, for those characters. And I'll talk about a little bit more about this later. But, like, I appreciate that, yeah, we're taking some time out, and this is like challenging because like things aren't as developed, but like I'm glad that they're being consistent and giving them some things to work with. And we honestly needed this fun, at this little bit of break from some of the seriousness at this point in the season. And so I'm glad, and I'm here for it. So
I was too. Like I said, I was so pleasantly surprised by this entire storyline. I just found it fun, and I was very close to even picking like this Clark and Kyle scene as one of my favorite scenes. Like I absolutely loved like their chat as when they're trying to figure out like what's going on with Chrissy. Where did she went? Like where did she go? Like is she coming back? Like that whole thing. I absolutely loved it. I love the friendship they've developed, and I love the way that they have kind of brought all that together. It's really sweet.
Yeah, it's a reminder that they've known each other most of their lives.
Oh yeah, that's true. I forget about that part too.
And because he talks about, the people that they've lost, and he thought that Clark was going to be one of those people. And I do appreciate the friendship that they've really developed over these 4 seasons. And so I just appreciate this, it's been it was reluctant at first, but they've known each other this long and then they've entered into this friendship. And I really enjoyed the two of them just being able to be there and having that and that fun perspective between the two of them.
Yes, I totally agree. I think it's great. And then like we go kind of straight from, Clark and Kyle trying to figure out what's going on to getting Chrissy's perspective with Lois. And this is really nice. I mean, we knew she felt pressured and it was just so much change for her so quickly. And she just sort of lays it all out on the line. So I like that we got to get that out. I ultimately think like Kyle and Chrissy would be fine. And that's, kind of where we leave them at the end of the episode, right? If they just sort of slow down a little bit. It's 2024. If you have a baby and you're not married, I know so many people that have done that. And most of them end up getting married in a few years anyway. It's just like a whole thing. I don't think it's like quite as big of a deal. Like it can be, but I think more or less if they just slow down, they'll be fine. She just needs to get over like this whole history with her parents and feeling like she's being forced into something that's like completely out of her control while parts of it are out of her control. She got pregnant really fast. There's nothing you can kind of do about that. And that's a lot to put on a person. But then you add that, then you add, getting married and just like all of these things it's just happening too fast. And I totally get that.
Yeah. Chrissy is a newer character for us.
Yeah.
And we unfortunately have very little background on her. And so it's nice to get more info in this episode about her background and her history. I'm sure if, again, we had more seasons, it would have been, delved into her reasoning. And I think that's part of why I think Martin didn't like this, because they're putting all that in this episode.
Yes, I agree.
It's like he likes Kyle's character and like, Chrissy's neither here, but like we need more development is what I'm saying. And that's what I think he's saying. And it's too fast. So like, I think maybe from his perspective, it would have been better like if they went a different way, but like they didn't know that like things were going to get, cut short when they were planning the whole arcs of character development. They've had to adjust with it.
Yep.
So like, I'm sure if like we had, 7 seasons, we would have delved more in the characters and it would have felt more authentic. But again, we've got maybe an episode or 2 with these characters. We're putting this in here. Yeah, it may feel a little rushed, but like I appreciate that we got more insight on her character and her background. And the real reason, part of the reason was like the stress was her parents.
Yep.
Chrissy did not want to turn into her mom, and her mom doesn't want that either. And we see that, and that's really her reasoning why she's questioning the fastness of this relationship and why they're getting into it. It's not that like she's necessarily disapproving of the relationship and Kyle. It's she just wants her daughter to have a better life than she did and take it at a slower pace. So I agree, Kyle and Chrissy just need to take more time, and I think that's her mom's whole point as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. Her mom from the beginning was saying this is moving too fast. And we see that Chrissy is feeling the same way too, but she's just having a hard time, I think, maybe recognizing that. Like, I think like subconsciously she's like, this is a lot. This is too fast. It is a lot, but it doesn't really click into place until she sees the dress, until her mom is present. And so then she sort of putting two and two together. You know what I mean? Yeah, for sure. But at least we get a good party out of this. I said it's a great time for a white wedding or just a good party. I don't know. That song kept popping into my head.
Yeah. Oh, but the music in this episode was excellent. And
Yes.
like the dance was so fun. Everyone just out there having a blast, watching it the second time, just noticing like you've got John dancing with Sophie. You've got like Kyle's out there doing the flips and stuff. You know, he's gotten Mama Beppo out there. Like everybody's just having a blast. And I saw this on Threads, but like I feel like it was more the actors having fun than the characters because they're just having a blast. It's like a celebration of the show and everything. And so it was just so fun to see them out there just, you know, cutting a rug. And even Coach and Jimmy out there just in their matching tracksuits. So I have to laugh. Jimmy, his name, the actor's name is River Song. Like,
No.
and I'm like having Doctor Who flashbacks. I was like, well, okay, but anyway, it was just a fun scene, and it's exactly what we needed. It was just a blast.
I agree. That was exactly what I thought. I was like, I don't think these people are very in character at the moment. Not that it really mattered because we just wanted them to have fun, but it very much felt like the direction was just have fun. It's a party.
Yeah.
Dance. Have a good time. Pretend you drank countless glasses of wine, as Clark admits later. But I think the one thing that stood out to me about these wedding scenes, and it's dumb, but I just cannot get over how tall Sophie is. That actress, like, seriously hit a growth spurt. She totally towers over Sarah. I was like, what? Who are you? Oh my gosh.
I know I had to do a double take. Now, IMDb does not have her age or her date of birth listed, and I couldn't find it out there. But yeah, puberty hit.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's probably been like close to 2 years between filming, you know, her scenes. But yeah, it was fun to see her bigger than her big sister.
It was wild. I was like, whoa, you grow up. Felt like overnight, but it, like you said, it's been a couple of years. And when you're at that age, I mean, she's probably what, like 14 or 15? That would I mean,
yeah,
you know.
somewhere in there. Yeah. So, I mean, like I work in a middle school. So like you see like sixth graders come in that are like, you're like, did you make it over here from the elementary school? Like,
did you take the wrong bus this morning?
well, I mean, like my building has both in it. So like
really?
it's entirely possible that like, you know, they could have, and then like you turn around and like, oh my gosh, like you just like,
2 years later.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So.
That's wild. They're like mini adults. I am not looking forward to this in a few years.
Yeah.
I am dreading middle school.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, one thing that I don't think we did hit, like we'll talk about the porch talk in my favorite scene, but we did not talk about that final scene with Lois and Clark there in the bedroom talking about the party. We hear him talk about that he's, you know, had multiple cups of wine and he's probably a little tipsy, but like they have that moment to like just be themselves. The boys are in town and they get to, you know, have some fun. And then we see the scene of like all the notifications coming in from the newspapers that Superman has been spotted. So, that was an interesting kind of close scene to everything. But again, I just appreciated this couple that we know and love getting to have some alone time and being that couple that we love. And listen, I'm not married, but I really appreciate the example of Lois talks about it in this episode, but getting to see it walked out of them working through stuff.
Yes.
And to get to celebrate and have some wins. And, so it was a fun little closing scene. So
I agree. I mean, I love just like their relationship. And maybe it's a little bit like, not like glorified for TV, but like idealistic. It's like the like ideal scenario, right? And it's like you aspire to be these people is how I look at it. Like I love it. I think it's great.
I think it's kind of course correction because for so long we have seen like the husband is the bumbling oaf. Aspect.
Yeah, I hate that.
And the antagonistic, between husband and wife, and so I think it's like, okay, let's go the other way a little bit to kind of bring things back to central to find to find a balance there. So yes, it's idealistic, but like.
But in a good way. In a good way.
It's good to see it. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think they do such a great job with it. And it's like, seriously, it's like I would aspire to have my life that put together and actually having those kinds of conversations in a calm manner. Which let's just say that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
Coming from someone who's married and has 2 kids. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, anything else you want to hit on? I think we got through most of it. We touched on the last scenes. Yeah. Superman's outed. Someone's seen him. He's back. So now we got to deal with that.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. Next episode, I know we're going to deal some with that. The title's Break the Cycle. And the images that have been released several of them are flashback images because we see Lex with the full head of curly hair and the beard.
Nice.
So we know we're going to have some flashback, but we are probably going to address that as well and some other things that take place in the present. So, I think we're going to deal with that some next episode, maybe a little bit more the next, but who knows? But yeah, so it'll be interesting.
Maybe this is where we meet Elizabeth.
Yeah.
That would be exciting.
There is a shot of Lex with an actress that's a younger actress. That's not the current day,
not current day, but you said flashback.
Yeah, so we'll see. All right, so we're gonna pause for an ad break, and we'll be right back.
Shape out and eagle.
All right, so going in chronological order, Flash is up first, and he called this one Make the Most of It.
3 weeks ago, I died. Instant. Everything went dark. Then, just as fast, the light returned. But the life I came back to was different than the one I left. And it made me realize, really realize, how fast it all goes.
Whoa! Easy, old guy. Check this out.
How quickly everything can change. how fragile life can be. How fragile our relationships are. We'll never forget the sacrifice that gave us this second chance. A second chance to do more, to be better, and make the most of the time we all have on this planet.
So Flash says, the opening monologue by Clark, this scene really hits home for me, as I really agree with Clark about living every day like it could be your last. None of us knows what could happen tomorrow. We could get hit by a bus crossing the street or suddenly have a heart attack. So don't waste time or waste energy on things that don't deserve it. Life is short, and we only get one shot at it. Enjoy everything you can now. Don't wait for tomorrow, and make the most of it.
Agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think giving Clark more of a mortality is going to help grow the character. This is a neat way of doing it where he is not totally powerless.
Yeah.
But he is, realizing that, like, I'm not necessarily indestructible, and, like, things may be different now. And so I really agree with Flash. It was a good opening monologue.
Oh yeah, it was great. And when you put the music behind it, and then like knowing what just preceded it was like a completely wordless like series of like scenes. Like it was great. Just I loved the whole opening, the logo, which just then goes straight into this monologue. It was very well put together.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So I'm up next. And it's Porch Talks. So let's take a listen.
Do you want to talk about it?
I don't know what happened.
Well, for starters, you died. So you can't expect to just bounce back and be the same person.
It's not just that. And everything feels different. I don't feel strong. And my hearing, I can barely hear out of my left ear. And it's almost like...
You can't trust your own body.
Is this who I am now? I mean, am I just never gonna be what I was?
Maybe.
Well, that really sucks.
Clark, every time I walk past a mirror, it's still jarring. But someone once said to me, whatever scars I have are a symbol that I survived. What matters is that you're here with me now. Everything else we can deal with later. Did you just say that really sucks?
I think I'm feeling the wine.
It's a first.
There's not a day that goes by that I don't wish I could thank your dad.
You being here with us is all the thanks you want.
I love the Clark and Lois Porch Talks, and I love how honest and open they are. This is an example of them working on their marriage and talking, and Lois brings that up to Chrissy later in the episode. So it was just great, and I'm here for it.
I agree. I love their moments as well. And I absolutely love that they've drawn this parallel between Clark and Lois's journey this season. She felt betrayed by her body throughout her entire cancer journey, which I think is very real and something that cancer patients just really struggle with. And now Clark is kind of going through a different yet similar betrayal. And so they can kind of come together and have this mutual understanding of what it feels like to not rely on your body, to feel like it's working against you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I liked it.
Yeah. Good stuff.
All right. Well, I chose the Lois and Jordan scene.
Hey,
Hey,
we need to talk about that phone call.
I told you I'm fine.
Well, I'm not.
So what, you want to make yourself feel better?
I want us to move past this. Please talk to me.
I just kind of wish you chose me.
John didn't have powers yet. He couldn't protect himself like you could.
I know, but everything's just always been so easy between you two. Ever since Metropolis. Whenever he had a problem, it always just works out. But me, I screw everything up.
That's not true.
Dad died because of me. Grandpa died because of me.
Jordan, look at me. This was all Luther. Your father and your grandfather would never want you to blame yourself for this, not ever.
Mom, I'm not mad that you chose John. I'm mad that you were right. I keep letting you down.
Sweetie, I love you so much. As much as I can possibly love another person. And it kills me that I ever made you feel like I didn't. And I want to do everything to make this right, but you have to let me. Please. Okay.
I love you, Mom.
Love you too.
I was very glad they're actually addressing this and not letting it drag out.
Mhm.
Although, honestly, with such a short season and a final season, they couldn't really afford to. But it's still just such a great scene between the two of them. I loved it. I thought it was very sweet. It's, the kind of moment I'm sure that, every parent dreads yet hopes for at the same time. It's kind of like a weird combination there. So, but it was really great. I loved it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that he was to the point of he could vocalize and share with her his feelings and not hold back and do it in a way so that he could feel he could get it out and feel heard, and that he really was heard and he felt heard and she could be there for him. It was just a really good scene.
It was.
All right. So if you would like to support our show, and we thank all of our patrons for doing so, this is what you have to do.
If you'd like to support our podcast, you can do so at our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/tomorrowslegends.
All right. So first up, we have an email from Comic Geek Kev. OMG, John L. or something. Good day, legends. I'm on vacation, so my timing is going to be off for a few episodes. Apologies. It's okay. I think we got this in proper timing.
Yeah.
Last week, I was hoping Jonathan would play a bigger part in bringing Superman back and defeating Doomsday, and bam, he's got powers. Think John was feeling what a lot of us were, sick of Jordan's crap. Great performance by Bishop. It's kind of funny. At first, I thought maybe it was a dream sequence or something, but it appears not. But I am wondering, Is it permanent, or did the Kryptonian tech give them to him because of the situation? It's definitely more enjoyable to watch him learn about his abilities than Jordan.
So I think he's wondering if, like, he was sitting on the pod, and he's wondering if maybe the Kryptonian tech in the pod gave him the powers.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I don't know, but I don't think that's the way they're going. But yeah, so
Maybe he is an episode behind. Okay. Anyways, 3 episodes in, we finally see the Irons family, thanks budget cuts. And as expected, they're going to join the fight. We are definitely an episode behind. Okay, he's talking about last week's episode.
yeah.
Sam is back in uniform and trying to pull strings. What was the other officer questioning about the serum? Wouldn't she want Clark back as well? Or maybe she's concerned about how Bizarro turned out after being brought back? Update. Yes, that's what she's worried about. Further update. Yes, that's what she's worried about. She's worried about a second doomsday. Oh, man. Luther's got some big brass ones just showing up at that farm. I really dislike this guy. Well done, Cudlets. I really like the way the heat vision is displayed here. The eyes glowing with that lens flare. Very cool. So now we know who Lois chose. But I'm sorry, that makes sense. Jordan has the powers, and the whole favorite son thing, obvious manipulation. Had she picked Jordan, he would have gone to John and done the same thing. Agreed. I would have loved to have seen more flashbacks of Martha throughout the show, just to be able to see that Clark, Martha, and even Martha-Lois relationship. Is Jordan turning to the dark side? I'm really getting tired of the whining either way. This is one point in the show that I don't care for. They've made him fairly unlikable. Of course, kids, even twins, can be very different. But this is a writing choice, and it doesn't always come across the best, in my opinion. You're not wrong. Great Krypton. Sam injects himself? Did he think that was a good idea? Apparently, yes. Thinking Steel and Starlight are really going to have a chance when Superman didn't? I know, heroes do hero stuff. I just feel like they needed a better plan. He took them out in seconds, but at least they survived. Okay, so I assume Sam's plan in taking the serum was so he could come back, stronger, but that his plan was to kryptonize his heart. Now, that's a plan worthy of comic book science. Dang, I love this show. Too bad Sam couldn't have made a fortress version of himself. Oh, I know. Sad face. Are we going to hear from Lucy? He didn't mention her, and I honestly don't recall what happened to her after that whole cult deal. I don't remember.
She was, I think, set up in Metropolis, I think, maybe? Yeah,
Sounds right.
But anyway, yeah.
Too bad Sam... Oh, wait, I already said that. Okay. I liked the little flip that it was Sam that Lois was referring to at the start of the episode. And what beautiful words. When these writers get it right, which is almost always, they really get it right. And surprise, Clark wakes up. Although we don't know exactly what will happen next. I'm glad they didn't string it out too long. I don't know how much more my unserumed heart could take. Amazing writing, outstanding performances. What a waste for this to be the last season. Next week, we get to see Elizabeth Luther. Slow your roll, buddy. Not yet. Great episode. Giving this 9 out of 10.
All right. Next up, we've got a voicemail from Perry White.
Hey, fam of Steel. Perry here at the Smallville Boutique customer service desk, trying to return Kyle and Chrissy's wedding gift. Womp womp. Look, y'all know I freaking adore Sophia Hasmeek, but Chrissy and Kyle's love story is pretty low on the list of things that I cared about in this final season, especially an episode dedicated to an impromptu wedding that didn't even happen. So, since I don't think it's fair to criticize someone else's narrative without offering an alternative, all right, here goes. I think Chrissy would have been better served by solely focusing her story around how she, Lois, and the Gazette was going to cover or handle or deal with Lex. Much in the same way that Lois and Lana had that conversation an episode or so ago. I mean, they could have even taken it a step further, and it could have been revealed that Lex approached Chrissy to fire Lois, but she refused and Lex threatened her. Or We could have learned that Lex offered to buy the Smallville Gazette, and Chrissy seriously considered it because she'd be able to use the money to raise her kid. Both of those stories give Chrissy a chance to showcase her leadership at the Gazette and better integrate her into this season's story arc. As for Kyle, I mean, Clark could have shared that he doesn't feel the same since he returned and can't keep up with his sons. And in return, Kyle could have shared that as an older dude in the fire department, he has the same problem keeping up with the new young guys. But as a leader, it's his job to prepare them, just like it's Clark's job to prepare his boys. They could have bonded over that. I mean, it's a way to include Kyle, and you don't take away from this season's story arc by trying to shoehorn a wedding in the show. Easy peasy. But instead, we got a wedding story that was haphazard and it was awkward. You had the domineering mother trope and the overdone runaway bride story. On the bright side, Sophia has Meek look wonderful in that wedding dress, but they could have saved that shot for the finale, basically having everyone gather for Kyle and Chrissy's actual wedding as one of the show's final celebration scenes. All right, now that I got that off my chest, there were some things to celebrate in this episode, like Clark and Jonathan geeking out over Star Wars and Mad Max. It's just nice to see those fun and fantastic father-son moments, and I thought that was pretty cool. I also appreciate that after last season, where the family had to deal with Lois's mortality, this season Clark and the family has to deal with his mortality. I like that kind of balance. And to quote George Lucas, it's like poetry. They rhyme. Another thing that I liked was how heroic Superman looked when he arrived to save Jonathan. I thought they might make him appear in a weakened state somehow, and he may have been, but it's important when Clark puts on that suit that he's a different person in the public and he can't show that weakness. He looked like a freaking boss walking through that fire blast, and I thought it was freaking cool. Of course, it's that fire that leads me to my second biggest nit to pick about this episode, right? So when Jonathan arrived, he walked through the fire and it didn't affect him. However, when henchman number 1 blasted him with the fire, it knocked him back. Certainly, it was a concentrated blast if that's sort of the excuse you want to use, but it was still just fire. Sure, could have knocked him off balance, but we had already seen him walk through that fire and it didn't affect him. So it was kind of unbelievable that henchman number 1 would get the upper hand on Jonathan in that moment, which is what prompted Superman to show up. My third nit to pick is Jonathan wore a freaking hoodie as a disguise. I mean, come on, it didn't work for Green Arrow and it's certainly not going to work for Superboy. But to compound matters, when he arrives and gets in front of the person that he's going to save, he's already taken the hoodie off. That was a pretty dumb thing to do, especially in light of the recent Kent family problems with secret identities. I mean, I personally think this is all laying the groundwork for Clark to reveal his identity to the public by the end of the series, but I digress. All right, here are some stray observations. Good gracious almighty, Sophie is gigantic. When they were showing the wedding celebration, or I'm sorry, the no wedding celebration, and I'm like, who is this girl dancing with Sophie? I mean, who's this girl dancing with Sarah? And I'm like, oh, that must be her sister, Sophie, that we never see. And she's freaking gigantic, man. She's done a lot of growing since the last time we saw her on screen. Another stray observation is I sort of lament the fact that we never got the time for quieter, sort of just hanging out moments between Clark, Sam, John, and Kyle. I mean, there are obvious reasons why we didn't get that, but whatever. I also feel the same way about Lois, Lana, and Chrissy. If the show obviously wanted to incorporate Kyle and Chrissy this season, I think it would have been also a much better and fun idea to have all those characters sort of have moments together at bachelor and bachelorette parties. That way you can have some fun with them, and it's just sort of a quieter moment to get some character development and just a little bit of fun. Anyway, next week should be back on track as Superman is again back in Lex Luthor's sights. All right, that's all I got. This has been Perry White telling Chrissy that she can do much better than Kyle. All right, that's all I got. I can't wait to hear what everyone else has to say about this episode. I'm out.
Well, good stuff. I'm sure Martin would agree with a lot of the stuff you were saying. And yeah, in an ideal world, I would have liked to see things go differently like I was talking about. And like spacing things out would have been cool too. I like your idea of the parties for everything, but that's not the way they went. I guess, some of it is just time constraints of only having the guest stars so many episodes and limited filming, and we know like everybody's going to be back for the finale, so yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think he had a lot of good points. I'm glad I'm not the only one that clocked Sophie turning into a giant, so that made me feel better. Oh.
All right, next up we've got a voicemail from Dad L.
Hello, Super Fam. It's Dad Al here. First thoughts on this episode. Wow, I love the opening sequence. The cinematography was beautiful. Just the wide shots, and that was just high quality movie cinematography and scoring. And I just thought that opening whole montage, that opening scene was wonderful. And I liked how we got Clark's monologue over that. And it's interesting, with what Clark's going through with his weakness. Now he can even more relate to what Lois has been going through. So I like that aspect of this episode. And I do like that they're going with that Superman isn't quite what he once was. And if you remember in the comics, right after Superman came back, he was weak in that final battle. He had to use guns and booster rocket boots and things. And then his powers were restored to him. I won't spoil the comic for those who still have not read The Death and Return of Superman. But yeah, so I like that they're taking that cue from the comics and playing it out here on the show. Another thought on Jordan. What if Jordan is meant to be like a supporting hero to Jonathan and Clark, kind of like a Felicity to Oliver? Maybe Jordan shouldn't be in the field regularly. Maybe he has other skills that could be useful. But he could come in handy when they do need a third person. But, maybe that's just not him. But it's interesting to see that he's got the maturity now to think about, I need to think about what I'm going to do, what I want to do with this. So I like that. I still don't like the whole goggles thing. And I know that was their grandpa's, but they've got to move on past that at some point. And let's just go ahead and talk about Kyle and Chrissy. I'm glad to send them on their merry way. But one thing that was great about this episode is that how they gave the backstory on Chrissy and her mom and her dad and their relationships. It was very well written. It didn't require long exposition, just these tidbits that were woven in that gave you a lot of backstory. It gave you exactly what you needed. But again, I'm happy for them, and I'm happy to move on with the real meat of this season, getting into the Superman and Lex and all that. So I'm going to give this episode 8 out of 10 indoor grills. Dad Al is father of Krypton.
Indoor grills, yes. I was so concerned.
And that's a neat idea about Jordan, giving him a different role. Like, he's got the powers, but maybe he can use them in a different way. Like you said, that's an interesting aspect because it's not something that we really had. So yeah, that's a neat idea.
Kind of like a super powered oracle.
Yeah. All right. Closing out our feedback is one from Rick Marshall.
Hey guys, this is Rick from Orlando with feedback on episode 4 of Superman and Lois. How ironic is it that the one time I can get feedback into you on time has to be an episode that I don't really care a whole lot about. I didn't think this was a great episode at all. I thought it was a terrible way to wrap up the Death of Superman arc, which is a major event, and they spend about 5 minutes on Superman reuniting with everybody at the beginning of the episode. Then they immediately, they should have spent a whole episode on this. Then they immediately bounce over to Chrissy's wedding. Then we do that for a little while. Then we go over to Clark and Jonathan flying together, and then Clark is feeling weak and feeling the after effects of whatever surgery he had. Then we bounce back to the wedding. Then we got to see Luthor's henchwoman, quick scene with her and Lois. And then some more wedding. Then we have to have a fire. We have to have Jonathan trying to be a hero. And then in the midst of all this, we have Jordan somehow deciding he doesn't want to have doesn't want to use his powers anymore. And we sort of wrap up again with Chrissy's wedding. I thought the wedding actually was handled well. I liked the adult way that Chrissy and Kyle decided they weren't ready yet for marriage. I thought that was very well done. Some of the scenes, I thought the scene where Sarah is with Chrissy and saying, "Where's the gummies?" to try to settle it down was hilarious. So the wedding part was handled very well. But I think in a normal 13 episode season, they would have given the wedding over to a separate episode. They would have had a separate episode with Superman coming back from being dead. And I just didn't like the episode. I thought it was too much of a hodgepodge. It did remind me of the original Death of Superman story, which I wanted to talk about briefly. And I'm not talking about the one from the early 90s that Martin was talking about, where the Superman's death became a major news item for several months on the network news. Big news story. The circulation of Superman comics and DC comics in general went up by millions, literally millions. It was a big major news event. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about the original Death of Superman back in 1961. There was a story written. Back then, there were these things called imaginary stories, which were stories that involved all the normal characters, but they were outside of normal continuity. They were like what-if stories, or almost like parallel universe or Elseworld kind of stories. But they involved all of our characters. It was just something that was considered imaginary, which I thought was a funny terminology because ultimately all comic book stories are imaginary. But this one was the Death of Superman. What if Superman actually died? It was a 25-page story, issue length back then. And the gist of it is that Luthor is in prison, and he somehow stumbles on an element that enables him to develop a cure for cancer. And he announces that he's going to reform. He's going to be a good guy. He gives this cure for cancer to the world. And then he starts working on a cure for heart disease. And he says, "I've turned over a new leaf. I'm going to be a good person." He becomes friends again with Superman, because they had been friends as kids back in Smallville before they had a falling out. And that's a separate story, which I can talk about sometime. But anyway, Superman gets him out of prison. He talks to the parole board, and because of the cancer cure and everything else, Luthor is released from prison. He's a hero. They have to protect him because the rest of the underworld is now mad at him. So there are all sorts of assassination attempts. Superman has to defend him. Bottom line is that Superman sets him up with a lab, gives him a signal watch, and he and Luthor are now buddies. But it turns out to be a long con, because in reality, Luthor claims one day that he's in distress. Superman rushes to save him, and then Luthor attacks him with a green kryptonite ray and basically kills him. He kills him with kryptonite, and he's actually dead. And there's actually a scene where Luthor drops the body off, very similar to what we saw in this TV series where the body was dropped off. Luthor drops the body off to his friends, and Superman is indeed dead. And there's no Lara in the fortress as a hologram to help him. They didn't really have that mythos back then. There was no helping, so he's really dead. And the world mourns. Luthor is, of course, on top of the world. He's glorifying and being king of the underworld. He wants to be king of the world. There's this big funeral. All the world leaders are mourning Superman, Superman's friends, Lois, Lana, Lori the Mermaid. Supergirl at the time had not been announced to the world. She was Superman's secret weapon, but she shows up at the funeral in her secret identity. It's a very sad occasion. But then the next part of the story supposedly has Superman crashing through a wall of Luthor's lair and basically says, "I'm going to arrest you." And Luthor says, "How can you possibly be alive?" And then he whips off the disguise, and it's actually Supergirl in disguise. And that's the first moment where Supergirl sort of reveals herself to the world. And she says, "I'm Superman's cousin. I've been his secret weapon. I arrest you, Luthor, in the name of Krypton." And that scene just gives me chills when she says, "I arrest you in the name of Krypton." She takes Luthor up to the Fortress of Solitude Solitude. And in the Fortress of Solitude was the bottle city of Kandor. Kandor was a Kryptonian city that got shrunk by Brainiac, and Brainiac was going around shrinking cities and storing them in these big glass bottles. And when Superman eventually defeated Brainiac, all the cities were restored to size, except by this point, Krypton had, of course, exploded. So there was no place to restore Kandor to. So this Kryptonian city, Kandor, remained in this bottle up in the fortress. And they have a way of reducing themselves to visit the people inside the bottle, the Kandorans, the Kryptonians. So Supergirl takes him to Kandor, and he is tried. And Luthor is convicted of the murder of Superman. And you talk about how terrifying Michael Cudlitz was as Luthor this season. Read the Luthor in this comic book. He is terrifying. He is cold. There is one scene where he's sitting in the trial where he's looking at all the people trying him with contempt and saying to himself, the puny ants. He calls them puny ants. And he has this scheme that when they convict him, he's going to make a deal with them. And when they convict him, he says, I'll make a deal with you. You free me, and I will expand your city. I will restore your city to its normal size. And of course, they turn him down. They say, we are not going to make a deal with the greatest criminal of all time. So the punishment is banishment to the Phantom Zone because they don't believe in the death penalty. So they banish him to the Phantom Zone. And that's kind of the resolution of the story. But, there's a couple of scenes about this that I really remember, and one is the very final scene where Supergirl has replaced Superman. She's on patrol. Again, she's just a kid. She's 17 years old, maybe. She's flying with Crypto, the Superdog. They're flying together, and in the distance, they imagine they see the ghost of Superman waving at them. And he's waving at them, and Supergirl is crying as she's flying. And I'll just read the panel here. The panel says, Choke, all I feel is a great sorrow at the passing of the strongest, kindest, most powerful human being I've ever known, Sob, my cousin Superman. Very emotional ending scene. I'll never forget it. It still gives me tingles when I read it. It's just a wonderfully written story. For me, that's the way you handle the death of Superman. And this story, by the way, was written by none other than Jerry Siegel, who created Superman. Superman's original creator, along with Joe Shuster, created some other characters. He created the Spectre, among some other people, but he's best known for creating Superman. He worked at DC for about 10 years. They fired him, basically, and by the late 50s, he was on hard times. But they brought him back for a couple of stories in the early 60s, one of which was this, and the two stories he wrote that I remember are magical. This was a great story. This is the way you handle the death of Superman. So for me, this is my version of the death of Superman. Just wanted to share that with you. Also, I wanted to mention quickly, I fully endorse what X-Force said. The general would have mentioned Lucy in his comments that he left for Lois. No question about it. If you have two children, you're going to mention both of them. You're doing a deathbed statement like this or a message to your children. You're going to leave it for both of them. That was just a big fail on the part of the writers. Lucy is a long-standing member of the Superman family. She actually goes back to 1959, which is when I started reading comics. The very first Lucy story was in Lois Lane. It was in Jimmy Olsen. She was Jimmy Olsen's girlfriend. She was depicted as blonde. She was a flight attendant, or back then they referred to them as airline stewardesses. And she's been around ever since, longer than a lot of Silver Age heroes, longer than the Justice League, in fact. So big fail on the writer's part to not mention her. They should have done that. Anyway, I've gone way long with this feedback, so I'm going to sign out now. Rick from Orlando. Talk to you soon. Thanks.
Good stuff. And that storyline, Death of Superman storyline, is very interesting. I had not heard of that. I'd heard bits and pieces of kind of that, but not like the full breakdown. So it's interesting that, here, but, that's an imaginary one that was. And then we had the other one in the main comic book line. We've seen one in the movies, and now we're seeing one in TV. So it's interesting seeing these different takes on things. And yeah, once again, if we had had a longer season, it would have probably been a multi-episode arc. But yeah, so, I don't know. We talked last season of maybe they're going to do like a time jump, or where the heroes are having to be in place of Superman for a different amount of time, but it's just not what we got, unfortunately. So
yeah, although it did seem like the writers, I don't know if they were aware of that comic storyline, but a lot of things seemed very eerily similar to how these things were written. So I don't know if maybe they took some inspiration from that or if it was just purely coincidence. But yeah, it was cool. That's not a storyline that I was familiar with either. Obviously, I was extremely familiar with the one in the 90s because it was very formative for my childhood. But yeah, other than that, good stuff though. I always appreciate the breakdown. He's got such a wealth of comic book knowledge, so I love hearing about it.
Definitely. Well, if you want to be a part of our show like these good folks, this is what you have to do.
If you would like to be a part of the show, you can send in your feedback to tomorrowslegendspodcast@gmail.com. You can also reach us on Twitter @tomorrowslegends. We'd love you to join our Facebook page at facebook.com/groups/tomorrowslegends and become part of the community.
Well, up next week is Break the Cycle. So that comes out on Monday. We'll have a thread up in the group where you can talk all about it whenever you get to it. And we look forward to hearing all the good feedback, and we'll have Martin back with us as well. So we're excited about that.
Definitely, yeah. It's always nice to have all of us together, especially since this is the final season of Superman and Lois. But it's good stuff. They're keeping it going, so just looking forward to how they ultimately wrap it all up.
All right, this is X-Force 11. So say we all.
And this is Harley Quinn. I'm out.
Tomorrow's Legends is not affiliated with CBS, Warner Brothers, HBO, or the CW. We're a fan-made podcast for entertainment purposes only and are part of the Cybercast network. Be sure to check out our partner shows, The Mandalore and Dive into DC, covering your favorite Star Wars and DC Comics properties. Thanks for listening.